Okay, take two. Pencil, graphite is the best for this. Please excuse the shadow on my paper from my webcam. It's it's unavoidable at the moment. Okay. So you want to have your set up your 3 objects, 2 to 5 is I think what they say, but 3 objects at least in your still life. And take a look at the composition of your objects as if you were framing it out. So you can make a viewfinder, you can buy a viewfinder, you can make a viewfinder, and this is going to be a tall one rather than a square one. And as I look at my 3 objects, I can see that the square is almost always going to take up about half of my space, my available space, if I crop it in. If I give it more side, wider opening on one side or the other, that's going to change. But I want to crop it in to within an inch or two of the objects to make it nice and balanced. And the cube takes up about a quarter of the lower left quadrant, and the pyramid takes up about a little less than half of the right-hand side. So then, after you've contemplated your still life for a while, do a traditional gesture sketch, just like you've been doing with do the basic gesture sketch, just like you've been doing all along with the plants and whatnot. So it's going to be a quick, rapid capture. I'm going to use a vertical format. So I'm thinking about my whole format in here. It's really important to think about your entire format and where it stands within the format. So you can even mark it off if it makes it easier for you. Okay. Now I'm going to bisect it also because the way that my objects are set up, it fits in the quadrants pretty well. So this would be this is your gesture drawing of the objects within. Melina, if you're going to talk, then unmute. But if you're not going to talk, please mute because there's a lot of background noise. Thank you. You can unmute and talk anytime, no problem. Just the background noise is really loud. If you have any questions, please ask. Okay. So here's the sphere. Here's the square. Approximately. Here is the pyramid. Just gesture it out as best you can. Try to nail it. So this is why we do the gestures, is target practice. We're trying to basically capture the proportions, the size, the feel, the structure of the objects rapidly and quickly so that you have as a gesture. So then you go back. The second step is to go back and cite it and see how close you were and correct where you're not close enough. So the way to cite is you hold your pencil at arm's length, lock your elbow. The pencil needs to be vertical to your sight. Don't tilt it this way or that way. Now they're absolutely vertical. Put the tip of the pencil on. I'm going to use the sphere as my unit of measure because it's perfect. The spheres are perfect for units of measure. They're round, they're symmetrical, they're the same distance all the way around, and it's the smallest thing on the scene. I don't want to use the cube for my basic unit of measure because then I would have to use fractions of a cube to measure everything else, and that's a drag. So it's really important that you lock your elbow. Don't ever do it like this. Always do it like this because the relative distance of the size of the object is going to change as close and far as the pencil gets from you. So we measure from the bottom to the top, and I'm going to measure from the bottom of the sphere to the bottom of the cube. That's 1, 2. So nicely. My little still life objects are so perfectly sized. I love them. And the width of the front of the cube, or I think the width of the whole thing would be 1, 2, and this is in the way. Here's the cube. Measure the sphere, and the cube is 1, 2 and a half. Okay, so this is my single unit of measure. So I'm going to establish that as the starting point unit. So whatever size this is going to dictate what size everything else is. If you're having problems doing a symmetrical circle, there's several different tricks you can use. One is, of course, you can measure it yourself this way and measure and say, okay, that is 1 and needs to be a little bit bigger on this side to be equal all the way around. You can turn your drawing upside down and check for any asymmetry. Usually you can catch where it might be a little flat on one side because we tend to draw skewed left or right until we learn not to. The other thing you can do, if it's really bad and you're really having a lot of trouble with it, is you can actually take a piece of tracing paper, which I don't happen to have at the moment, but trace it and then fold the tracing paper in half so the lines up as close as possible, and then fix the side that's not round. And then you can replace it back on there and actually transfer it back onto the paper. So this is my 1 unit of measure, 1 base unit. And I'm using that to measure everything else. So I measured the cube, I measured the ball from the bottom of the, oh, it looks like this when you're looking, and in your eyeballs, you want to put the tip of the pencil at the top of the object and your thumb at the bottom of the object, like that. Okay? So then you measure it, and you can measure down 1. There's 1. There's 2. So it's 2 down, even in the camera. The camera is distorting it a little bit, so that's why you have to work from life, and you have to measure. Cite it, measure it, correct it, fix it, and do this many, 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 many times. And then you'll start seeing where all the inaccuracies in the photographs are that you're using for other kinds of reference, because you can't always work from life, and sometimes you have to work from reference. But if you don't understand what the camera does to your image, then you're never going to get a realistic image, really realistic image from a photograph. You're going to just get a copy of the photograph. If you want to do a copy of the photograph, then, you know, knock yourself out. But I want to draw realistically, and I want to be able to make stuff up. And to make stuff up, you got to understand how it works in real time, in real space. You can't bake a cake if you've never ever tried to put flour and eggs together, and you can't describe how chocolate tastes. You have to taste it yourself. So anyway, enough analogies. Let me measure my thing one more time because I forgot what the number is already. I have a memory of a goldfish. 1, 2. Okay, from this angle, it goes 1, 2, and the second line is actually lines up with the corner, which is slightly lower than the edge, which is what I measured through the camera. Slightly lower than the edge, but there's where the corner is. This corner, see, fractions are a real pain, so you definitely want to use the smallest object, because I'm going to have to use a fraction of that object to, well, now this is kind of interesting. You find all these interesting relationships. It's slightly less than 1 sphere to the edge of the pyramid. So I'm going to start with that. 1 sphere, slightly less than 1 sphere. It comes to about there. And the corner of the block is about 1/3 of the way. So that 1/3. So to the corner here. Now you can hold up your pencil in a flat line to line up the bottoms of the objects to see where they stand in space. The 2 leading edges of my objects are almost the same. This is slightly lower than this one. And the bottom of the sphere is slightly lower than the corner. So if I do have a straight line out here, the corner is going to be slightly above it. So far I've hit it pretty close. Not exactly perfect, but pretty close. And I said there was 3.5, 2.5 spheres across from edge to edge of the box. 1, 2.5. So one sphere starting from the corner, which would be here. 1, 2.5. So pretty close. And just for kicks, I'm going to take the whole, measure the whole side and see if it's equal to the other side. It's not. Okay, so I'm going to do, it's smaller, so I'm going to stick with the sphere. And it's exactly one sphere from the edge of the block on the left to the center, which of course makes this one 1.5, right? So check it again. 1.5. And that's 1. So there's like a half overlap. So if I take one sphere here to half, then it's a half longer. Now that works when I line up the edge of my cube with the side of the sphere by putting the edge of the pencil exactly alongside the edge of the, right here. So drop a vertical line down and see where things line up vertically. In the camera, since it's more to the left, the edge of the sphere is lined up with the edge of the block. I'm a little bit more to the right, so as you can see in the photograph, there's a bit of space here. So that works. So if you mark this as one basic unit, and then we can mark, I'm going to mark this space from here to here as one basic unit. This space from here to here is a third. This space from here to here was 2 basic units. Space from here to here is 1.5. And from here to here is 1. Okay. Any questions so far? I've got this measured. So how many units, how fraction of a unit do I have on there? It's about halfway. So we take this measure here, from here, and the point should be about halfway. Now let's take how many measures high. Got 1, 2. 2 goes to the top of the shadow. 3, 4, exactly. So from this point, got 1, 2, and 2 actually equals the top of the shadow, according to my calculations, which might mean I have to move that corner because that corner is lower. Let me check this again. See, this got to line, everything's got to match up. If it doesn't match up, because the shadow is slightly above the corner. So let me measure that corner again. 1. Yeah, it's a little. 2. So that's a little closer. So yeah, it's 1, 2, 3, 4. So there's the top of my pyramid right there. And this shadow should be here. I will have to reconcile this discrepancy because that's not accurate. Okay. So everywhere that you can measure it. Measure the negative spaces too. How much space from the bottom of the pyramid to the bottom of the cube is about half a sphere. From the bottom of the pyramid to the bottom of the cube, so about half a sphere. So that puts it like this. And then you can measure the angle by holding your pencil up against the angle of the object and carefully dragging your pencil down to your paper and see if it matches up. Okay, here. And this comes slightly above where that is. And depending on which eye I look out of, let's measure that front, that leading edge of the cube because it's slightly different than two whole ones. 1, 3, 1 1/3, 1 and 2, 3, 1 3/4. So our sphere from the corner is 1 3/4 right there. So I got pretty close. It's really gratifying when you start to hit the mark more accurately, more consistently. This is slightly above where that one is. And don't just think you know exactly what it is. Check it out because you could be wrong. And you can't fix a bad drawing with paint. And you can't even really fix a bad drawing with a digital tablet either. If you don't know how to do it in the first place, how are you going to be able to use other media to draw if you can't draw on paper first? So this is important. Back edge of the cube is exactly halfway up the sphere. Comes out right about there. So I'm liking that. I'm happy with that. I'm happy with this. We've got a shadow. Shadows count as shapes too. They should definitely be taken into consideration. This shadow is 2/3 of the way around. This shadow ends up being right about there and comes down to meet this object, which is casting the shadow on this object. If you look carefully, you can see the differences in the close edge of the shadow and the far edge of the sphere, which is more further away from the light. So there's a fuzzier edge on that shadow and a harder edge on the close shadow. Okay. Now the far side of the triangle, the pyramid. 1 1/2. So you take your sphere and to measure 1 1/2. And that lines up with almost nothing. So I'm going to measure it to see how far up from the base the back corner of the pyramid is. Little more than 1/2. So I take this measure, a little more than 1/2, right about there. No, that can't be right because I can't measure up with that. Yeah, no, that's all right. It's right here. I'm going to check the angle. Okay. This comes at a slight angle. And you can tell that by the shape of the space here. So now once you get things squared away in your measurements, and you should be marking all of these. This is 1.5 basic units. This is 1 basic unit. Let me see how much space there is to the left of the sphere. 1 whole unit. So from here to here, it's 1 whole unit. So that can't be right. It's not right. That doesn't correlate to the edge of the box. It's like 1/8. So you also want to look carefully for the negative spaces. Stop thinking for a second in 3D and just look at the shapes, the individual shapes that are made by the object and the things that are not the object. Here's one right here, negative shape, like so. This one you could say is a negative shape here. This is a negative shape here. This is a negative shape, or you can use the shadow. Shadow shapes are really great for helping to line stuff up. Get those in there. Ideally, these lines should either be perfectly parallel or should slightly shrink as they move away. I'm just going to measure it really quick and measure the leading edge of the cube. And it should be the same or slightly bigger than the back edge. It's the same. And the other back edge is actually noticeably different. So this are close enough on the same plane to be the same, but in the back it should be quite a bit, not quite a bit, like 1/8 of a unit shorter. So in this case, you can clean up your drawing to a degree, but I want to see, so I don't have to see all of your agonizingly, messed up structures. You can refine the lines and then put your units of measure in there. This one is 4. Oops, you can't see that. This one is 4 units, 4 basic units from here to here along this line. So 4 basic units. Just for kicks, I'm going to measure the side edge. I've got 1.5. Be 1, a little more than a half. So not too bad. We'll tuck that in just a tiny bit. Sometimes you got to split the difference, So from here, it's 1.5 basic units. Here to here, I believe was 1/2 of the unit. Here to here is 2 basics. This is 1. This is 1.5. Anywhere you think you can get a measure, go for it. You could measure on the angle or on the square as long as you're not tilting your pencil forward and away from you. So it should only go around like a clock face. If this negative space here indicates to me that this should be a little higher, and this should be a little bit lower. And there's white space in between. Oh, you're very, very welcome. You guys have any questions? You guys are going to be stars in this class. You're the only ones who show up to the lectures and stick around. That is the basic still life construction drawing.